Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the UBC Talks webinar about sustainable urban mobility planning. My name is Sibelius, and besides that I'm hosting today's webinar, I work at the UBC Sustainable Cities Commission as a senior advisor. As our second host today in charge of the technical side, I have a colleague of mine, Adham Maharamli. Union of the Baltic Cities is a network involving around 70 member cities in the Baltic Sea region. It was established in 1991, and it supports smart and sustainable development of cities, especially through the exchange of knowledge and experiences. UBC works through 8 thematic commissions, focusing on different sectors of the city life: sustainable development, urban planning, youth, health, culture, safety, education, and business. In the Sustainable Cities Commission, we work together to support the sustainable development and green transition in cities, as well as address cities' adaptation to climate change. Our secretariat is located in this beautiful building in Turku, in Finland, and it's hosted by the city of Turku. Our work in Sustainable Cities Commission, we create platforms for cities to exchange experiences and equip them with best practices and tools to progress further. We are also active in many international projects, such as the SUMPs for BSR. Our commission also coordinates the Sustainability Action Program of the whole UBC network. It's a guiding document for outlining the strategic goals that our network aims to achieve. It was planned together with the member cities, and the current program looks until the year 2030, as it was outlined with some other regional timelines. The Sustainability Action Program focuses on 5 topics that were selected as the most important to focus the sustainability efforts in this decade: mobility, water, biodiversity, energy, resource efficiency, and the cross-cutting issue of climate change. The UBC Talks webinar series address these topics in regular editions, organized 4 to 5 times a year. The webinars are open for anyone interested, and you can always find the recordings of previous editions on our UBC Sustainable Cities Commission website, and also you can register for the upcoming webinars there. In today's webinar, we are talking about sustainable urban mobility planning. And before we dive into the topic, I'd like to remind you that the webinar is being recorded, and that throughout the webinar, all participants can send their questions through the Q&A box that you can see in the Zoom panel. The recording and all the presentations will be shared on our website next week. As the project coordinator for the SUMPs for BSR project, I would like to begin with a short introduction to our aims and activities in the project. The challenge we are tackling is that the existing urban mobility systems are still heavily car-dominated, and transport is responsible for about 1/4 of the EU's total greenhouse gas emissions. As Europe aims to become climate neutral by 2050, and many cities in the Baltic Sea region even earlier, around 2030, this cannot be achieved without a sustainable mobility system based on cleaner and more active transport modes, cleaner fuels, and where possible, reducing the need for mobility. Sustainable urban mobility planning is an efficient tool for cities, but the concept can be quite difficult to adopt according to the guidelines, especially for the small and medium-sized cities. Based on the background mapping of needs, especially monitoring and evaluation is considered challenging. As an answer to the previous, our project aims to increase the uptake of SUMPs as a strategic tool for local authorities and to develop a common framework supporting cities to set up sound local monitoring and evaluation processes. The monitoring and evaluation framework will be a really practical tool for the smaller cities to evaluate the success and impact of individual measures and also to provide information for different stakeholders. Shortly, you will hear why monitoring and evaluation is such a crucial part of the SUMP process. We will also develop a model or a guideline for small-scale experimenting with active mobility measures to promote walking and cycling. You will soon hear about the small-scale pilots our partner cities are implementing and how they will feed into the development of the guidelines that help other cities also to do successful small-scale testing prior to bigger investments. Finally, we will organize a training program on sustainable urban mobility planning, including 5 online training modules, thematic training modules that are targeted for cities. And the idea is really to support the SUMP process by providing guidance on how to use the tools developed in this project, but also tools that are developed in previous projects and, for instance, the EU guidelines. We will open a call for 10 cities to join a SUMP clinic that offers a bit more individual support. And we also will make the learning materials available for anyone interested via the Baltic Sea Region SUMP Competence Center webpage. I'll recommend you all to visit our project page for more information, some news. And also I'd like to ask everyone to help us to develop the training program to suit your city's needs by answering a short survey. My colleague will share the survey link to the chat. You can find it there and also through our project page. But now it's time to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Professor Marcin Wołek from the Department of Transport Market from University of Gdansk. He has an extensive background in SUMP, and he will brief us into why SUMP is such a good tool for cities on the way to climate neutrality and why monitoring is such a crucial element of it. Please, Marcin, I will stop sharing and you can share your presentation.
Thank you, Aira. Welcome, everyone. Today, it is a big pleasure to speak in front of such interesting audience, people representing different fields and thematic areas. And exactly, sustainable urban mobility planning is a very complex concept. And I will start sharing my presentation for today. I am going to skip some slides, but I think presentation then will be available, and it is sometimes good to have it look for another topics. The agenda for my presentation, and I have only 20 minutes, is that I will try to put some light on this sustainable urban mobility planning concept. Then I will extend what Aira already said, that sustainable urban mobility planning can be a tool to support the city's efforts for climate neutrality. Then we will provide you some insights on selected benefits of the SUMP-oriented approach. And of course, this is the last things are monitoring evaluation of the sustainable urban mobility planning, because we focus also on smaller cities and municipalities with sometimes limited resources, and for them providing complex, precise, accurate monitoring evaluation, it could be a challenge that could stop them or slow their progress on urban mobility planning. And finally, we will show you first conclusions from SUMP SUMPs for BSR project. Our project started 1 year ago, and to be honest, it is not a very common topic that after 1 year we can bring so many findings and deliverables.
Marcin,
Okay.
before you continue, can you put the slides into the full screen mode, please?
Yes, like that.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you
very much.
Okay, so let's move. There is just short introduction about emissions and how transport sector contributes to emissions in the European Union. As Ira said before, it is around 1/4 of the total volume of emissions, but it is not only about emissions, it is also about consumption of materials and material stock. So in fact, if we could change our transport mobility systems, transform them into more with more environmental approach, everyone would be successful. And among our city partners, we found that share of transport sector is high. Of course, it is not an fully objective measure, but we can say that it differs from 20 to nearly 60% of the total emissions calculated for the city. So there is still a lot of work to be done in case of emissions. And in other areas, cities and countries achieved substantial results. But in case of transport, majority of cities noted that the share of emissions from transport and volume of emissions is growing after 1990. So one of the solutions, and very complex solution, could be sustainable urban mobility planning, which is also political response to the negative consequences of car-dependent development. Since 2007, European Commission is also familiar with the concept and started to promote and to support in a complex way. The sustainable and smart mobility strategy was adopted in the end of 2020, and it contains 3 pillars. You can see on the slide: sustainable mobility, smart mobility, and resilient mobility. Even those 3 pillars can be discussed as a separate pillars. In fact, sustainable mobility involves some sort of smart mobility and resilient mobility elements. And of course, other significant, important findings from this strategy is the fact that cities should achieve climate neutrality, improve its electrification of private cars, integrate electronic ticketing, making mobility affordable and accessible, and unleashing the full potential of data, which is directly linked to the topic of monitoring and evaluation. But when we speak about sustainable urban mobility planning, sometimes we speak about different products or different areas, because initially we should speak about the philosophy. And our research shows that philosophy is already strongly rooted among Baltic Sea region cities. In many cases, cities do not have typical sustainable urban mobility plan as a document, but the philosophy which is embedded in other strategic documents exactly shows that cities follow this sustainable urban mobility planning strategy and philosophy. Second area is the process. The process of development of sustainable urban mobility plan or similar document is as important as the final product, which is the document or strategy. And the process means that we should involve different stakeholders at the very early stage of a document preparation process. And finally, we have a product, which is document, strategy, SUMP, sustainable urban mobility plan, strategy for walking areas, and many other documents that could be associated with SUMP concept. And of course, people, because without people, without involvement of stakeholders, it would not be possible to not only prepare the document, but then to implement, because implementation could face some political and social challenges. That's why social involvement decreases the risk of such social political counteractions. Several years ago, I was involved in the preparation of sustainable urban mobility plan for city of Gdynia in Poland. This is a city with a large harbor located in the central part of the city. So we had to redesign the landscape of our stakeholders. A part of individual stakeholders, we segmented sector of institutional stakeholders, mainly education and science, selected companies, non-government organizations, but also other public institutions. And for example, in case of companies, a very important was the harbor and freight transport companies. And this is well-known table showing differences between traditional and sustainable approaches to transport planning. What is the most distinctive element is that sustainable approach to transport planning is focused on people, and main goal is accessibility and quality of life. And of course, quality of life is a very broad, subjective concept, but sustainable urban mobility planning fits extremely well into that concept. And of course, long-term vision, which is a very challenging element, especially in the times of black swans, as we had firstly COVID, then war in Ukraine, and many long-term plans and visions had to be redesigned or revised. Anyway, it still should be element of long-term planning and long-term visions. And in practical approach of our cities, there is always long-term vision and short, mid-term action plan. We started to think about the evolution of sustainable urban mobility planning concept, and we found that first documents were focused on car infrastructure-oriented planning, and the second stage was more focused on the mobility development, focus on cycling, walking, and public transportation. But in modern concepts of sustainable urban mobility planning, which is stage 3 and stage 4, we focus on quality of life, health issues, a new infrastructural approach. We speak about adoption of smart city concept, about resilience and circular economy, because city which is sustainable in case of mobility, this is also a city with higher level of resilience. So the philosophy is that we are jumping from urban mobility planning to quality of life. DG made this research on quality of life in previous year, and we can find that majority of cities in our Baltic Sea region, of course, the research was limited to several cities in Europe, found that cities are well evaluated by its citizens in case of quality of life. So I think this is a, let's say, special dish of Baltic Sea region, urban landscape, that citizens are evaluating quality of life positively, and sustainable urban mobility plan is an important input to those evaluation. But of course, there are several challenges for sustainable urban mobility planning in the Baltic Sea region, because it depends on size and the city and functions with links with functional areas. Population of the Baltic Sea region accounts to around 106 million citizens, which is 1/4 of the total European Union population, but it is distributed quite unevenly. We have around 155 functional urban areas, but what is specific element is that our urban landscape is characterized by a small number of large metropolitan areas of European or global importance, and there is domination of medium and small cities whose areas of influence are not extensive, but they are very important for social cohesion, for developing quality of life, and they form a very important function of local center for socio-economic development. And of course, a big challenge is development of 10T network, which was put into the agenda by the European Commission, and our Baltic Sea region could prospect from development of those elements. Here we can find how Rail Baltica would change the transport mobility landscape of big part of Baltic Sea region. And if cities many cities in Baltic Sea region are very ambitious, and they really put big efforts to achieve ambitious goals on emission reductions. This slide shows cities involved in our project, that Turku is going to achieve carbon neutrality by 2029, Greifswald by 2035, Gävle by 2035, and Sīzis, a quite small municipality in Latvia, by 2050. So if we want to achieve carbon neutrality, we have to precisely measure it, monitor, and evaluation. And here we can find an example of city of Turku, how Turku is measuring its greenhouse gas emissions, how it reports, and how it tracks the process of achieving carbon neutrality by 2029. So even from that perspective, from climate neutrality or carbon neutrality, cities should embed sustainable urban mobility concept into its routine agenda. Now we start about benefits of sustainable urban mobility planning. They could have strategic dimensions. For example, in the city of Panevėžys in Lithuania, another project partner from our SUMPs for BSR project, urban mobility planning influenced discussion about city center future, what the city center should look like in the long term, and how it should be serviced from the perspective of transport and mobility. But benefits of urban mobility planning can be found on different levels. For example, European Commission now tries to force cities to plan urban mobility planning on the metropolitan or functional urban areas. And here we have an example of city of Gdynia from Poland. The city adopted first SUMP plan in 2016, but it was focused only on the city. Then the city elaborated and adopted a sustainable urban mobility plan for one of the districts. The district's very specific, but for the district, and then more focus was put to municipal public transport, internal accessibility, and cycling network. And recently, city of Gdynia, together with other 58 municipalities, adopted urban mobility plan for the whole metropolitan area. And of course, in that case, in that larger dimension, the focus is put on collaboration, developing railway nodes, railway services, and intermunicipal transportation. But even if we speak about the whole city, sometimes we can extract a specific area which is heavily impacted by traffic, by tourists, by other users of urban space. And the city of Turku, for example, prepared a development program for pedestrian and leisure areas, which is more focused on active mobility topics and quality of life issues. But our daily life starts not in the district, starts not in the city. Our daily life starts on our local street. So modern concept of sustainable urban mobility planning focus also on local street level, because street is our natural environment as we live in the city. Every day we start our trip, we start our daily life with entering from our home, from our flat to the local street. So the quality of street environment affects us all, whether we are focused on walking to school, waiting at the bus stop, cycling, commuting, or even driving a car through a city. So this is something which we have to bear in mind, that urban planning, urban mobility planning starts from local street concept. And of course, benefit of sustainable urban planning is to bring balance in the urban space. I collected two different calculations about efficiency of spatial efficiency of different means of transportation from city of Malmö, Gothenburg, and Vienna. And regardless of differences in methodological approach, one finding is common. The most efficient means of transport is walking in the city. Then we can discuss what is the second place, whether it is public transportation or cycling. But first of all, walking is the most efficient. So sustainable urban mobility planning is also about bringing back the balance in our urban space, which is scarce good. Of course, walking is a fundamental for resilient and sustainable mobility, especially for small towns and municipalities. And we also use some scientific background in the project. And one of the most important and well-known ideas about walking is hierarchy of walking needs. So we start from feasibility, from accessibility, safety, comfort, and then pleasurability. But if we want to achieve comfort streets for pedestrians, we have initially preserve feasibility, accessibility, and safety. So our discussion goes nearly to an end. I have 3 minutes, but a short recapitulation. Sustainable urban mobility planning related monitoring indicators can be found in various documents of the strategic and operational levels, because now I have to speak shortly about monitoring and evaluation, which is very important because we have to measure progress. Of course, it does not mean that we have to measure everything, because there are many challenges according to access to data. But we should monitor areas like walking, cycling, traffic safety, public transport, emissions, air quality, and car traffic. In some cities, especially in the Baltic Sea region, there are also measured such areas like spatial planning, accessibility, health, densification, green areas, multimodality, fossil fuel-free fleets, and it shows you how complex sustainable urban mobility planning idea could be. And of course, I have to skip several slides, but we can find that modal split, which is absolutely the queen of monitoring evaluation, can be different in case of methodology. The results could differ in case of distance of travels, and could be different in case of district, what we measure, district, part of the city, or the whole city. Anyway, we should focus on modal split, because on the strategic level, it provides us a lot of valuable information. And of course, one of our findings is that modal split is strongly supported, sustainable modal split with domination of active modes like cycling and walking is supported by spatial layout of our cities. And a very good example is city of Greifswald and central part of city of Turku. Finally, we clustered indicators into several elements, and I have 1 final minute for recapitulation. So there is a big difference in organizational and institutional potential among the cities in the Baltic Sea region. And as we are dominated in our region by small mid-sized cities, some of them face limited access to complex databases, which is quite important barrier to the development of complex monitoring. Anyway, if the city wants to implement measures linked with sustainable urban mobility planning, it should not be stopped by deficits in data access. So, as the city is a stage of permanent conflict, sustainable urban mobility planning helps city in solving the conflicts in a more sustainable way. Thank you very much. And if you have any question, comments, I stay with you until the end of our UBC talks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcin. Thank you for a really interesting presentation. We will share all the presentations after the webinar, so you will have a chance to look into details of Marcin's presentation. And also I'd like to say that we have had a really interesting workshop about sustainable urban mobility indicators, and you can read a brief summary of the results on our project page. Next, we will hear city perspective to the topic, and this is going to be from Turku. Turku is developing its first city-level SUMP actively, and we'll hear experiences from development specialist Juha Pulmuranta on how SUMP will help Turku reaching its ambitious climate goals, and what kind of monitoring and evaluation processes there are for Turku's SUMP, and how it links to the functional urban area SUMP that Turku region already has. Thank you, and please, Juha, you are welcome to start.
Okay, thank you, Ira, and hello everyone. Just share my screen now, I hope.
Yes.
Great. I'll just remove this. So yes, I'm during the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to tell you about Turku SUMP project, and during the last year, I have been a project manager for conducting this SUMP. So why did Turku decide to make its own SUMP? Turku is the only large city in the region. It has over 200,000 inhabitants at the moment, and it's growing approximately 4,000 to 5,000 inhabitants per year. And Turku has, like Marcin already said, Turku has more ambitious climate goals than other cities, and particularly other municipalities in the region. So Turku's goal is to be carbon neutral by the end of 2029, and other region has the goal to be carbon neutral by 2035. And Turku foresees that it has a better chance to reach the joint regional goal for the modal share, which is 66, by the end of the decade. At the moment, if we only have a look at the internal trips, it's 55, and if you look at all the trips that inhabitants make, it's 49, so there's still some gap left anyway. And in Turku, we also discovered that we have over 500 decided measures for transport and mobility, and implementation of those measures cannot be sufficiently monitored. So we have this image that we have used in different circumstances and situations, and it describes quite well the problem that we had. We have national, regional, and local level programs, guidelines, strategies that include measures, and those measures, they have not been prioritized. Some of them are overlapping, some measures lack coordination, responsible parties, schedule, indicators, and so on. So that was one of the main reasons why Turku wanted to conduct its own SUMP. How this Turku SUMP is positioned related to other programs. First, we have this national level transport system plan that is still valid, and then the state and the regions in Finland make this agreement on land use, housing and transport. We call it MAL agreement, and I think it was yesterday, or I think it was yesterday that we finally managed to get a new agreement for the region between the state and the region, and it's like a guiding document as well for the region. And then we have this regional transport system plan, which is still valid and will be updated next year. And we have used this as a regional SUMP for the region. And then we have this Turku SUMP, which is totally new plan, and it will be it's being finalized at the moment, and it's concerning the city level. And what's the relation between these two is that if you look at the left, this PUA SUMP in Finland, SUMPs will be integrated into the regional transport system work. So this will act as a PUA SUMP in the future. And SUMP principles will be applied, and update will be made in 25. Now if we look at the right sector, this Turku SUMP will complement and give input to the regional SUMP, and we have managed to apply SUMP principles, mainly excluding regional coverage and wide cooperation with other institutions. And this first edition of Turku SUMP will gather all decisions and guidelines related to sustainable mobility and make them measurable and resourced actions. And we have also included new, more radical measures to this Turku SUMP, aiming at reducing the number of cars. But in the project, we didn't have enough time or other resources to plan them so far that we could start implementing them next year. But they are there, and we hope to get support for those for proceeding that planning as well. So an update will take place probably in 28. So in a way, we have this dual model of SUMPs in Turku region. Level on these plans is strategic in both. We aim to make the city level SUMP more operative, and it has some operative elements, but it's because it's not replacing any other traffic plans. We decided to keep it on more like upper level, more strategic level document. Coverage is obvious. The other one covers the whole functional urban area, and the other one, city of Turku, apart from public transport, which is regional. And coordinator in PUA SUMP, it's Regional Council of Southwest Finland, and in city level, it's of course city of Turku. You can see the years when these documents are effect and when they will be updated. Key stakeholders in PUA SUMP, it's the focus is on municipalities of the region, but also state level actors. And in city level SUMP, it's more local residents, private sector employees of the city, but also Regional Council of the Southwest Finland, which is an important link between these two documents. Monitoring and evaluation. In PUA SUMP, it's part of the regional transport system planning and monitoring processes, and in city level, it's still to be confirmed, but most likely SUMP coordinator and a steering group, cross-sectoral steering group, and then also this ongoing SUMPs for BSR project will support monitoring and evaluation work as well. Now, some of the key actions from the project that has been taken place related to this Turku SUMP. 18 months ago, City Board decided that Turku will make this Turku level SUMP. Then the first summer in 23, we set up working structures. The first kickoff meeting for the steering group took place in September 23. Then was defined the objectives and timeline also for the project. About a year ago, we really put effort on integrating this SUMP to relevant processes and projects in the region and in Turku, for example, to the travel center. And last spring, and last winter as well, we focused on measure defining and planning. Then in May and June, we focused on stakeholder engagement. We made a large survey to different stakeholders, organized workshops, had a look at the previous input that the city had got from previous projects during the last 3 or 4 years. And then since August, we have been selecting the measure packages and indicators and making prioritization between different actions in SUMP. And now we are taking SUMP to the decision-making process, and it will hopefully end by the end of this year. So here's the draft cover page of Turku SUMP. It's all in Finnish, and I did not have time to translate it in English, so it's just to show you how it looks like. Now this slide shows the in a way like the logistic framework in Turku SUMP. So we have this vision, traffic, environment, and service network of Turku, encourage everyone to move sustainably, healthily, and safely. Objectives are seen here. And then regarding the indicators, we have these 3 main indicators which are related to or indicating modal split, reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, and also reducing the number of serious injury accidents. And in SUMP, we have grouped the measures to 4 packages, which you can see here in the bottom of the slide. And these groups contain 22 measures, which are divided into 66 actions. So that's the logic behind this Turku SUMP. And like I said, we have 22 measures, and each measure has this kind of measure card in the SUMP document. This measure is concerning park and ride facilities and developing those. This is an example how a measure card will look like in Turku SUMP. And in the upper part of this card, there's the description of the measure. There are also actions, number 51 and 52, that promote this measure. And we have also these indicators which show that how this particular measure will affect on our goals, our objectives in this SUMP. And also in this yellow section, we have impact assessment based on quite large benchmarking survey, but also on accessibility of this measure to the inhabitants and also to workplaces. We also had tried to use a traffic model, but these measures weren't concrete or local enough to get much support from that. So to conclude my presentation, we have, like I said, 3 main indicators. They are similar to what we have in climate plan and traffic safety program, and they cover all SUMP objectives quite well. And we also have had a look at the measure-specific indicators, and we made a reference to upcoming SUMP indicators as they will require regional cooperation and reporting work to do in the following years. So we didn't want to put too much workload to our SUMP coordinator that will probably begin next year. And we also have several existing indicators presented in SUMP, but so far we have not defined any systematic follow-up for them. And regarding the evaluation, like I said, we hope to get a SUMP coordinator for this implementation phase. We already have had this cross-sectoral SUMP steering group, which will hopefully begin or continue their work during the implementation phase. And we are about to set up a citizen panel in SUMPs for BSR project. So that's the situation we have at the moment. And I think I'm running out of time, but if I still have a minute left, I could run through these last bullet points. So Turku had a specific need to better coordinate the measures that already had the political acceptance, and SUMP guidelines could only be partially applied. It was a bit challenging. Schedule, resources, and even scope changed during the project, and we really needed the advanced project management skills. And framework contract was very useful during the project. It was possible then to expand the contract with the consultant. And even more time would have been needed to link this SUMP to the ongoing processes and to better communicate its overarching role. It does not replace any other program, and I think it wasn't clearly enough communicated to all the stakeholders. It was very difficult to define the optimal amount of stakeholder engagement because we only had so much resources, and now because of that we have a student on her master's thesis to look into this topic. And some process was very valuable itself, like Marcin told. It really helped to identify overlapping processes and increase internal cooperation in the city. And cross-sectoral steering group was very active, and decision-making process generates an extra interest to the SUMP and might be more demanding than expected. And with that, I'm concluding my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juha, for a really comprehensive presentation. You have a couple of questions in the Q&A. We will take them in the end, so you have a little bit time to think. And also I recommend everyone else to ask questions as well. Next, we will move on, and one of the shared challenges or questions rather for cities is how to increase the share of active mobility and how to collect data about it. And we will hear next from Maarja Käger, project manager from Institute of Baltic Studies, about how small-scale experimenting or piloting can be a useful way to explore new ways to increase the use of active modes, and also to make decisions leading to better conditions for active mobility. Please, Maarja, stage is yours.
I'm from Institute of Baltic Studies, and one of our tasks is to support partners in developing pilots and carrying this out during the project. As you saw then from earlier presentations, then there is a big question for cities quite often, that how exactly and what should we do to have this balance in urban space or quality of life, and how to implement a SUMP that we have planned, that we want to do something, but what what and how exactly to do. And as mentioned earlier, then quite often smaller cities are having more challenges in increasing the share of active mobility because they have a lack of resources, lack of people, lack of maybe ideas and connections to test, try, and maybe also hear about good examples. And for this, the project gives a good possibility to explore new ways to increase use of active modes and also show the impact that active mobility measures have. So project partners have possibility to choose some of the measures, as in case of Turku, there are a lot of measures already chosen, and they can test, they can ask questions from each other, get recommendations what and how to see, so that they have good pilots to test and later on to take into SUMP so that they can see the effect, whether this pilot increases usage of active modes or not, or what should be done differently in the future. So they get good understanding about pros and cons of different measures and they can share these experiences. And another case that was mentioned also is that, yes, of course, we're going to have these pilots. We are testing something, but we need also the data. We need the data to understand whether the pilot or measure is having any impact or not. And also we can use the data in measuring the SUMP. Are we going to have impact for balance in urban space or not? Are these measures doable in our city or not? Or should we change the measures to achieve our aims? And also we need data to justify the need of resources to the decision makers. So the decision makers can understand that, okay, if you spend maybe 200,000 for improving pedestrian roads, then it has a big impact for safety. So as you understand, then during the project, we are having two types of pilots. We are having small-scale experiments and also data collection pilots. And we have 6 cities who are testing these pilots. And for small-scale experiments, half of the pilots are concentrating on bikes. So, for example, Cesius is testing whether having temporary cycling lanes and roofed bicycle units near housing blocks, does it have any impact on safety and usage of bikes? Then Greifswald, you hear about them later as well, but they are checking also the green phase for bicycle traffic and modal filters. And Panevėžys, again, you hear a bit more later. They're checking the impact of innovative racks for bikes and scooters. And other cities are having a mix of different measures that include also these pedestrians and bicycles. But Gavle focuses on digital campaign, and they're looking at through the employers. They are trying to see whether it's more valuable or having more impact if they connect with employers and to see how does it change the modal split. And in Turku, they are having creating mobility point. So they are mixing different transportation ways into one point to make it more comfortable. And data collection pilots are quite well connected to all these small-scale experiments. And many of the cities are testing automatic data collection machines. We have faced several difficulties. It's good that we have had possibilities to change ideas, suppliers, and what to bear in mind while looking for some machines or automatic possibilities. But some of the cities are also carrying out manual data collection to see how they support understanding the automatical information we receive, and also to understand whether and how much we can rely on some kind of information. So quite often it's good to mix data collection measures. So we get a lot of valuable input and ideas from the project in this way as well. And some of the cities are carrying out surveys. They are carrying out real-life laboratory and instrumental research. And some of cities, for example, Turku is creating citizen panel. So they are going with panelists to specific spots, for example, this mobility point, to show and test, and also to test bikes, to collect ideas what and how to develop. So really hands-on. And again, developing different measuring options, focusing on cyclists and pedestrians, as we have seen that we know a lot about using the cars, but not about cyclists and pedestrians and their problems. So the whole process of piloting, as you probably understand already, is that on the first year, that is ending at the end of October, we are preparing solutions, small-scale experiments, and also data collection pilots. And we're already also collecting ideas and lessons learned to share with each other and with you as well. And on second year, some of the cities already have started. The plan is to implement the pilots they have prepared for. And during the whole project, we are collecting the lessons learned to share with you, as Ira mentioned, also to have this training package at the end of the project. So on last year, we are transferring the solutions. And that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Maarja. Next, we will actually hear a couple of more detailed presentations about the local piloting. And first, I will give the stage to Saskia Seidel, mobility planner from the University and Hanseatic City of Greifswald, and she will tell us about improving bicycle traffic in Greifswald.
Thank you very much for introducing. Yes, our pilot is, or our project is improving bicycle traffic in Greifswald. But when I will tell you, Greifswald has a bicycle traffic share of 39% in the model shift, you will probably think, why do they want to improve their bicycle traffic? And that's a good question. So you will see in the next minutes. First, I want to outline Greifswald shortly to give an overview about the SUMPs for BSR project in Greifswald and how is it linked to our general planning, traffic planning. What are the expected impacts and the role of data collection, and what are the challenges and solutions so far, and what we learned so far. Yes, in Germany, some people say that Greifswald is the secret bicycle capital in Germany. And in terms of the proportion of bicycle traffic, the distances traveled, Greifswald is even the national leader. So as you can see, cycling is in the model shift is quite high with 39%, but also motorized traffic, together with passengers and motorized traffic, is quite high. Just to compare, the model share of cycling in Germany is about 11%. So how could we do that we have so many bicyclers in our city? First, the Greifswald is also called City of Short Distances. So we have a compact city structure with around about 51 square kilometers. And for the region of Mecklenburg-Pomerania, quite high population with 60,000 inhabitants. The function of Greifswald are different. So it's supply, education, medical care, and working. And one of the most important employers is the university and the medical center. The high proportion of students, around about 1/5 of the population, is quite big. So in our city's face, you can see that our population is quite young. The compact structure. You can see in the map by bicycle, almost everything is reachable into 15 minutes or 5 kilometers. But let's come back to the topic today, the SUMPs for BSR project. Our small-scale experiment for sustainable mobility is to improve local transport by installing a mobile filter in our inner city and a separate green light phase for bicycle traffic at an intersection of high importance. But because of the short time, I will tell more about the mobile filter in the next minutes. And this is where also the planning has progressed the most so far. This picture shows one street in our inner city. It's the busiest streets in the inner city, and this area is important for monument protection. The pilot's objective goal is to reduce the motorized traffic by installing a so-called mobile filter. The spaces of the city center should be given priority to the needs of pedestrians, cyclists, and as well to the public transport, and moreover to increase the livability and traffic safety. But what we want to do, I will show you. So in the first picture, you can see the motorized traffic use the inner city as a shortcut. So 1/3 of the traffic is just useless. So by installing a modal filter, we want to reduce that motorized traffic, and other kinds of mobility will become more attractive, like going by foot or taking a bicycle instead of using the car. You can see that in the last picture. The modal filter will be initially the traffic signs like do not pass, but accept public transport, in combination with bicycle racks, benches, green plants on site to offer residents or guests the freed up space instead of parking slots. The street space should be able to be experienced as a new public space. And by the modal filter, the inner city is divided in 3 parts. That's kind of a Dutch model. And all parts can be reached by a private car, but they cannot through the inner city anymore as a shortcut. To show you how it looks, first, we will implement it as a traffic experiment under the German road traffic law to examine the effects on the entire road and on the entire road network around, but with the intention to become a permanently implementation as a physical structure. For that, data is very important and also a main part of the project. I make a little break and we'll tell you how is it linked to our general traffic planning in Greifswald. As Marcin Wołek said in the beginning, SUMP has not to be a real document, but it can be kind of a philosophy which is implemented in other city plans. Like in Greifswald, we have different key actives, for example, promote pedestrian traffic and quality of stay. And in these pictures, you can see our market square through the ages. So it's mobility and public space through the ages, which you can see here. In the 1980s, there was an intensive use by cars, by parking and driving as well. Then there was a difference, and in the 90s, there were more bicycling and also racks implemented at the market square. And since, I would say 15 years now, the whole market square and the biggest shopping mall or street in the inner city is a pedestrian zone. So now pedestrians are prioritized, options to sit and take a rest were implemented, and bicycle and logistic traffic is limited in time to pass this area. Yes, other key actives are promote bicycling and public transport. Just to give you an example, we will implement a new network for public transport next year. And also our infrastructure for bicycling. You can see some pictures here. Yes, back to our SUMPs for BSR project. As I already said, data is very important for our pilot. So the expected impact and the role of data is that we will count, that we expect that to reduce 1/3 of the motorized traffic, which uses the inner city as a shortcut. And for that, we make different traffic counts. So we will count motorized traffic and bicycle traffic, as well as noise measurement before and after and during the modal filter. There will be questioning interviews with shop owners, residents before and after the experiment, and also a query about changes in the routines of mobility. So yeah, for that, and this experiment will take 1 year. So we will count every 2 months. So just to monitor the whole experiment. Challenging so far was the communication and coordination of important actors inside the municipality, as well as public institutions for the need of the project. It was also challenging to discuss the modal filter with the Monument Protection Authority. The inner city is a very high monument protected area and very sensitive. So changes in the street space, cross sections of the streets is much more difficult than I thought in the beginning. So the whole communication process was quite intensive, but at the end, the solutions we found was quite satisfied. So we found a good solution together. So I would recommend for any kind of this project that communication is transparent and try to listen what are the fears of other actors. And yes, always try to communicate to positive things, not what is taken away, like here in our daily newspaper, like no entry bans for cars or Greifswald drivers beware. So just focus on the positive changes. So who benefits from the changes and what can you do? Or yes, who will benefit from it? And the next months, we expect high pressure from politicians and also from public, but we are working at the moment on a good conflict management. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Next year at this time, we will see how our pilot worked out. So far, thanks for listening. And if you have any questions, don't be shy. You can write here or write me an email s.seidel@greifswald.de. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Saskia, for a really nice summary of your learnings from the piloting, or from the planning phase, I mean. Next, we will hear another example from Panevėžys. Augustas Makrickas, the Deputy Chief Architect of Panevėžys City Municipality, will tell us about their actions to promoting cycling in schools.
Hello, everybody, and welcome from the municipality of Panevėžys. We are a green city. We are a mid-sized city. We have a lot of public spaces. We have a lot of bicycle paths, although we don't have that many bicycle users at the moment, which we are trying to improve. So looking at our SUMP that we've finished up in 2018, as we see from a model split and vision, we have more than half of users are using cars for their daily commutes, and then are less users of pedestrians while commuting by walking to work and using public transport. We have at the moment when it was measured, there was quite a significantly small bicycle users. And while we're aiming at the 10% of bicycle users at 2030 in Panevėžys, it's not likely that it's going to be that way if we don't try to act and change and improve mobility in the city. So the project goal, as we have two pilots, one is connecting with the data collection pilot, which is gathering the data of the user habits and sustainable mobility improvement in aligning with the installation of bicycles and scooter racks in schools. And for the infrastructure rack pilot, we are planning and doing the installation, promotion, and testing of electric and traditional scooters and bike racks in selected schools. For the timeline, as I mentioned, and the whole idea of the pilots is that if we cannot really try and change the mobility and the ride share quite fast, we can at least try and cannot change the habits of the whole city in a few years. We can at least try to update the habits of children, and we can test if it's going to work and is it going to bring the results we're aiming for. So for the data collection pilot, we have mostly data collections and throughout the years and stakeholders meetings where we try to figure out what our indicators are the best and improve them by reviewing them, how it's working with the measuring. For the rack pilot, not only we're installing the infrastructure in the schools, but we're also taking up and holding habit building campaigns in the city, which are connected with the public events in the city, the public festivals, as one of that we had just the last weekend with the SUMP encouragement contest for photography, and also doing the car-free day in the city. So we've selected 10 schools. The selection criteria for 10 schools were choosing the schools that are in the territories that correspond to the SUMP priority zones. These are the areas in the city center, and the residential areas where the conditions for pedestrians and cyclists need to be improved the most. Secondly, these are in dense and intensive areas where a lot of people are living in the neighborhoods and are commuting quite often to school and work. The schools are connected and are located near the main bicycle paths and main streets of the city, which improves and helps them to encourages them to use mobility and use bicycles to commute to the schools. And of course, they have the largest numbers of students in the city of Panevėžys, which can get effects and could be measured quite more easily. So we have the map and the schools marked. As you see, the browner areas are the areas that are, according to SUMP, needs to be improved, and the dashed lines of the southern sides are the areas that are being developed currently. So the schools are spread out through the city, mostly located in the city center and on the western side of the city. But as I said, these are the most densely livable areas of the city. Here are the children numbers in the selected schools. We have the gymnasiums on the right and the high schools on the left. As you see, the numbers of the pupils are not that large, but they're also not that small in general. So the potential users of the infrastructure and the potential data collection subjects are quite well spread and could give us interesting results in general idea. We have the aerial views of the schools. The schools are different and are similar in some cases. Some of them have better infrastructure, some of them have not really renovated stadiums or surrounding areas. They're all naturally, as in a post-Soviet country, are in the neighborhood areas and the greener locations. But when we're going there and looking at them, there are different schools, and all of them have different challenges in general. Some of them have, if you see it on the top left, they have some, let's call them mini cages for bicycles that offer their protection, but in some schools, these cages are used as storage facilities. Then if we're looking on the lower left corner, we have some updated infrastructure in the schools that have quite good racks for bicycles in general and have new stadiums and new infrastructure. Some of them have some spaces that they recommend we use for these racks, and also try to improve the surrounding sites as well. And others are fenced and have no dedicated places in the schools. And as you see on the upper right corner, some of them have no place inside, and scooters are mostly left on the sidewalks and corners, which is also not really comfortable and not really safe for the city in general. We already started with the site data collection. On the right, you see a typical data sheet, which basically the measurement takes place from 7:30 at 8 a.m. in each school at the same time slot. So this is the time when the school starts here, and this is the most typical time when the pupils arrive or are driven by their parents. And the bicycle and scooter racks occupancy is monitored after 8 a.m. when the first lesson starts. So it's more easily and more calm to count the bicycle and scooters in the place left. And also it's most likely that none of them are going to be arriving later on. We're also measuring the noise in the area using apps. We're also calculating buses, motorcycles, bicycles, scooters, pedestrians, and of course cars that are in the area. And we did a stakeholders meeting already. It was a nice meeting. We had a lot of different stakeholders. We had our administration official representatives. We had some policemen gathering us. Most of them, of course, were with school heads and school administration staff meetings, because they are like naturally touched by the infrastructure and they have their aims and their strategies for the city. We talked about different indicators, the use of them, what is the project in general, and how we can reach the school communities better, what are the main concerns in the school. So basically, if we're talking about it now, most of the parents and school communities are not really they're using bicycles in their leisure time. They're just really not letting children to commute to school in case of traffic danger. And so these are the fears that we want to overcome, as well with these habits, improving events and talking about activities like using bicycles and scooters for their daily commutes, not only for leisure that they do with their families going in the pathway. Because the city has quite a lot of bicycle pathways and beautiful sightseeing tours, which are quite popular, but not really for daily commutes. So the struggle with some of the stakeholders as well is always expectations. The expectations are sometimes larger than the project improves. So some of the school heads already brought pictures of the infrastructure they want or they've seen somewhere. And we're trying to discuss and find the best solutions. At the current moment when we're talking with the school administrations and following sites and looking at them, we're figuring out how to mix and match with the infrastructure that would be for electric scooters and electric bikes, and also would be possible for more traditional scooters and bikes. So some of the schools have some infrastructure already, and some of them really don't have it. So mixing and matching, sometimes quantity versus quality, might give us the best result at here. So the infrastructure is different, as I said, and there's a lot of possibilities. We're figuring it out which school would have the best effects with which infrastructure. And we're starting to discuss it with them and start to improve our views about it. And also, one last thing, I just wanted to show you the event that we did last weekend. It was a car-free day, and it's a Sunday. and also an active mobility in action photography contest. So we had a lot of bicycles in the main city square. There on the top or right corner, there's a project team with us. And for the photography contest, which was putting pictures of car alternative mobility in the city, we presented 3 scooters, traditional scooters that could be used in the city, and these are the winners on the lower left. We had some nice stickers on them and the bike parades and sports activities we're having in the main city square. We closed up some streets as well in the city square, so it was a nice day to enjoy and see less cars in the city. So that's a short introduction about our pilots. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now it is actually time for the Q&A session. And I'm hoping that there will come some questions from the audience. At the moment, I think there was a couple of questions to Juha, and they were already answered. Augustas, maybe I'll mute you. Yeah. I have a question to all of our cities that presented their activities. Do you regularly use this kind of small-scale piloting for active mobility, and how well it's linked to the regular planning activities? Maybe Saskia or Juha, you'd like to answer?
Yeah, I can answer video. Yeah, this the pilot is linked to our inner city mobility concept, which was published in 2021, so already 3 years old. And yeah, now we can we would have done it anyway, but now we have much more opportunities also with public workshops. So our idea is to make some public, to use the public ideas, how we can use the free space, and if there are any wishes or needs, except parking slots. So yeah, and also to to get good feedback from other cities and their experience, or yeah. Did I answer your question, Ira?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Juha, you have hand raised.
Yes, thank you. It's a difficult question because I think it depends on the pilot. Some pilots are easily linked to ongoing processes or strategies that city has, and in some EU projects, for example, pilots might be ahead of time, so to speak. So there's not there isn't very close linkage or even interest in the organization in permanent activities of the. But I think even in those cases, those topics may get interest after 2 or 3 years. So the pilots that have been made before can be used. Those experiences can be used later on as well. So I think they are not. There's always at least some benefits in these sort of small pilots that cities make.
Good, thank you. maybe I'd like to ask Marcin, how do you see that then the regulation update changing the monitoring and evaluation landscape?
Thank you, Aira, for that question. As you know, European Commission prepared a set of so-called sustainable urban mobility indicators several years ago. But to some extent, they were very complex and sometimes too complex for especially smaller cities with smaller resources and data access possibility. Currently, European Commission is working on another set of urban mobility indicators. We hope that this time they will present themselves as a less complex and they will be not as intimidating for several cities as it used to be. But also European Commission regulation on the TEN-T network extends a category of urban nodes for higher number of cities. And this urban nodes, category cities with a category of urban nodes, they will be obliged to prepare sustainable urban mobility plans. So in fact, this TEN-T network development and extension is influencing sustainable urban mobility planning in form of resulting as obligatory plan for cities with that status. But of course, for many cities in Baltic Sea region, it won't be a big challenge to transform their existing documents, which sometimes are very complex, but they are not branded or labeled as a SUMPs, to the SUMP format.
Thank you for the answer. There is actually one question from the audience. What kind of role traffic simulation and modeling played in the development, implementation, and monitoring of sustainable urban mobility plans?
Thank you for that question. In fact, some cities operate traffic modeling, and having traffic model brings some advantages for monitoring evaluation, especially if we want to calculate emissions from traffic, and also for modal split calculation divided between individual traffic and public transportation. But for sure, I can say that having calibrated actual traffic model helps with calculation of emissions from transport sectors. It could be very valuable sources of data.
Thank you for the answer. We are actually running out of time. I warmly thank all the listeners who have joined, and welcome back for the next webinar. UBC talks about green public procurement that will be organized on 26th of November 2024 at the same time. And I hope that today's webinar gave you good ideas and inspiration for your work. Thank you and have a good day.